While America was wielding its influence throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, Mexico was trying to figure itself out from a revolutionary standpoint. Europe had some very uneasy alliances that bound some of the European nations together. One of which was an alliance between Germany, its neighboring countries of Austria and Hungary, which at that point was the Austro Hungarian Empire, and Italy at the time, along with other alliances to be known as Russia, Great Britain, and France. And they were economic allies, but also loose military allies at the time who had the idea that, hmm, we might actually support one another should there be any sort of conflict. Okay? The Triple Entente in World War I is what linked Britain, France, and Russia together from an alliance standpoint. The Triple Alliance was Germany, Austria Hungary, and Italy. Okay? And in the summer of 1914, Archduke Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of the Austrian Empire, was visiting neighboring Serbia. And some Slavic nationalists, Serbian nationalists, wanted to have Serbia annexed by neighboring Bosnia. And there was a Slavic nationalist who assassinated Archduke Ferdinand, along with his wife Sophie. Oh boy. Serbia is allied as a Slavic nation with Russia. Russia's in the Triple Entente. Austria-Hungary is in the Triple Alliance. So it became something to where, well, Russia would immediately come to Serbia's defense, as the Austrians were very angry, obviously, with Serbian nationalists who were assassinating royalty. So Austria-Hungary would mobilize its army, and Russia would mobilize its army to the border of Austria-Hungary, and seeking influence in the Balkan regions, the Russians would be a threat in the face of the Austrians. Germany saw that their ally, Austria, was being provoked. They would immediately come to the defense of their allies and see, oh boy, we're probably going to have two different fronts because we have a triple entente country on either side of us. You've got the Russians on one side, you have France on the other. And concerned about their ally, Germany declared war against both Russia and France. Okay. Germany would then invade neutral Belgium, who was Britain's ally, who had already been in alliance with France and Russia to begin. Now you bring Britain into the war. Okay, so they would declare war on Germany. So within a couple months, you would now have Austria, Hungary, and Germany fighting in a major European war against Russia and France and the United Kingdom. Okay? So you would soon have changes in the names of these alliances. The central powers would be Germany and Austria-Hungary. And later on, they would be joined by the Ottoman Empire, which is basically modern-day Turkey, which wields a bit of influence throughout the Mediterranean, but then also a sliver of southeastern Europe near modern-day Greece and Bulgaria. And on the other side, you would have the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia. And they would all vie against each other. And then, of course, you would have others, like Italy and Japan, who would throw their support behind the Allies. at that time. So even though they were allied to one another, many of these countries had their own ambitions, and for economic gain, they had their own thoughts. As far as the United States was concerned, uh, the American public and the American government saw this and was like, "Ooh, that is that's really bad. That has potential to be really big. Um, that we really don't want anything to do with. We want to be as impartial and neutral as possible within this." And President Woodrow Wilson urged the American public to call off ideas for American involvement within the war. But neutrality would be reasonably impossible, largely because the overwhelming majority of Americans sided with British sentiment. We felt loyal and sympathized with Britain. As such, we are from Britain. Okay? You also had various different propaganda machines that would basically say the Germans are committing various different atrocities, some of which were true, others were exaggerated. But all of those different types of things would create an animosity towards Germany. So, further complicating America's efforts to remain neutral was the idea that, well, the British Navy had blockaded many German seaports to keep them from trading. The way the United States saw things was, we're going to show neutrality by trading with both. We're going to still trade with Britain, but we also fully intend to trade with Germany as well. Except now you have British naval vessels blocking German ports. The U.S. literally cannot trade with Germany. We can only trade with Britain. Okay? So that caused an ordeal that, even though we were trying to maintain neutrality, the blockade kept us from really doing so. Okay? And in order to kind of thwart this, beginning really of the United States being an arsenal for the Allies, to thwart this, the Germans would resort to a new kind of warfare. One to where the German Navy itself would not be able to challenge the British Navy on the ocean surface. But what if you have a vessel that can go underneath the surface? A submarine. Or as the Germans call it, an Unterseeboot, a U-boat. Okay? That's where you get the U-boat from, Unterseeboot. That's German for undersea boat, a submarine. And as such, they would be difficult to detect and further difficult to destroy. Well, the German U-boats would seek out British liners, often which many were commercial, and attack them. And in May of 1915, the British vessel, the Lusitania, was attacked by a German U-boat, and it killed about 1,200 people, 128 of which were Americans. This was a passenger liner. The Germans had basically said that it was carrying munitions headed for Britain as part of the war effort. We have right to destroy this. The United States angrily said, you need to stop attacking civilian liners, especially those that have Americans on them. We are neutral. Do something about this, Germany. And a lot of Americans considered that an unprovoked attack. And it would further continue when even the German government said they would back down. They continued to attack Allied commercial liners, one of which was the Sussex, a French liner that was attacked, had some Americans on it, did some damage there too. And Germany was deemed to have been unlawful in their attacks. Okay? So you have all this going on. We're going to talk about the actual war itself here in a little bit. But going on between all this backdrop of neutrality talk and things like that, you still have American politics. And in 1916, you have another presidential election. Boy, it's an election year this year. Imagine that 104 years ago we had a presidential election as well. That further complicates neutrality talks. Woodrow Wilson was quite popular when he first started and when he was elected in 1912. By 1916, his popularity had begun to wane. However, it became clear that Woodrow Wilson was at least attempting to keep us neutral. And by 1916, the United States was not involved in a conflict in Europe. So, at the Democratic National Convention in the summer of 2016, it became a popular mantra that Woodrow Wilson kept us out of the war. He kept us as being neutral. So follow Woodrow Wilson because we didn't go to war with him. So the mantra that Woodrow Wilson kept us out of the war really swept through the Democratic Party, and it was just enough to get him reelected. Okay? So, in a very narrow election in 1916, Woodrow Wilson is reelected on the mantra that he kept us out of war. But that would soon change because Germany kind of saw the writing on the wall. American vessels and Allied vessels carrying American goods were an arsenal for the Allies. Yeah, we were neutral and impartial. It was pretty clear that we not only favored the Allies, we were doing more with them. We still traded a little bit with Central Powers, but it was very difficult to do so. But the United States was also very leery of Germany and German provocations, and for good reason. In early 1917, Germany made a gamble. You see, this backdrop of the Mexican Revolution that we just talked about was affecting American and Mexican relations. Germany recognized this, and they sent a telegram to the German ambassador in Mexico, instructing him to offer the Mexican government a deal. Basically, if they would join the German military alliance, the Central Powers, Germany would help Mexico take back territory lost as a result of the Mexican-American War in 1848. So essentially, Germany would help Mexico take back California, New Mexico, Arizona, and parts of Texas. Okay? So, if the Mexicans would join on the side of the Germans and keep the United States occupied, then, well, we'll help you once we win, get some of your old territory back. Now, it was intercepted by British military intelligence personnel. And some historians argue that the Zimmerman telegram sent by Arthur Zimmerman, the German foreign secretary to the Mexican ambassador, or the German ambassador in Mexico, it was argued that perhaps maybe it was a plant, that the British maybe faked it because they wanted to force America to get into the war. The war was not going well for anybody, but if America got involved, it would definitely swing one side. America's intervention would change the war in particular. So Germany and Britain had a stake. Germany wanted to keep the U.S. occupied. Britain wanted to get the Americans involved in Europe to help win the war, which we would. And the Zimmerman telegram sometimes is deemed, conspiracy theorists say it was faked. Whether it was faked or not, it became clear. Germany's offer to the Mexicans, Germany's continual harassment of commercial ships in the high seas that affect American trade and lives, it became very clear that there would need to be some sort of American intervention. The Germans are trying to drag us into a war. The British are trying to drag us into a war as well. We are theoretically on their side. However, Woodrow Wilson said, you know what? We're expanding economically and from a world power standpoint. If we enter into this war, upon war's end, we could have a really big seat at the power table when things are negotiated at the end. All these secret alliances, all these things going on, Germany's attempt to get Mexico involved, German sinking of American vessels, and harassment of Americans abroad. In the spring of 1917, it was deemed that the United States would no longer tolerate Germany's interactions. And so eventually, Congress would vote to become involved in World War I. So you now have an official war declaration in April, and the United States would have a drastic effect on a very, very brutal and ghastly conflict.